Howdy gamers. The other day I made two grave mistakes. The first was logging into the hellfires of twitter.com. Since I logged in on a day that ended with Y, things happened and people were pissed off. People were mauling hard over some tasteful Taylor Swift AI pictures that no amount of blurring would allow me to show you. Let's just say I saw a Muppet giving her the Jim Henson, if you know what I mean. There was also righteous indignation pointed towards a little indie game called Palworld. I saw people having Category 5 meltdowns about every single detail of the game. I don't think I've seen this many baseless accusations since my war crimes tribunal back in '52. People accused the designs of being made with AI, the whole project of being an asset flip, and some went as far as to claim that Palworld stole files from Pokemon itself. Like most accusations on Twitter, these claims were backed up with the best sources that mankind has to offer. All this controversy caused Palworld to spread faster than HPV through a military base after a visit from the barracks bunnies. And let me tell you, even I was getting a little itchy. The itching got so bad that I made my second grave mistake for the day, purchasing an early access survival game. I can't see a legally distinct Electabuzz firing a minigun without getting at least a little interested. And once I saw little leaf guys doing what the United Nations baselessly claimed that I made people do from 1836 to 1952, I had to make a purchase. I then spent the next week or so playing nothing but Palworld. I also looked further into the developers as well as the claims of AI and plagiarism. Pals were sacrificed, threads were read, and I think I can finally answer the question, what's the deal with Palworld? It doesn't make sense to talk about the actual gameplay of Palworld without covering the two major controversies first. The first and most commonly spouted one is the alleged use of AI. My current view on AI is that it's something that I don't really care for, but I see it as an inevitable tool that many people will use going forward. The adoption rate of AI won't slow down as tools continue to get better and better. What was once a niche set of programs requiring high-end hardware for terrible results has already transformed into something influencers can use to show you what they would look like if they graduated high school in 1990. Palworld's developers Pocket Pairs are no stranger to AI. One of the earliest games is called AI Art Imposter. Imagine a drawing game from something like Jackbox, but the AI draws for you, which sounds kinda lame if I'm honest. Half of the appeal of drawing games is drawing dicks. It always has been, and it always will be. A drawing game where you don't draw is like an AI artiste without access to Midjourney. Completely worthless. Jokes aside, the game doesn't look that bad, but there's a reason no one talked about it until the Palworld controversy. Like most Jackbox style games, it's hard to stand on its own outside of other games in a larger bundle. A lot of this company-wide AI affection is likely driven from the top. The Big Cheese CEO Takuro Mizobe is a certified AI fanboy. They've excitedly posted about what they call GPT-4 games, but more importantly, they've said weird stuff about how AI could change copyright laws and shared fake AI Pokemon in the past on their Twitter. But all of this isn't evidence of AI being used in Palworld, despite these things being the main evidence people have pointed to when making that claim. While some of these designs are more creatively bankrupt than a Mr. Beast clone, without clear evidence that AI was used, definitively calling Palworld's pals AI generated is straight up misinformation. The entire claim that these pals were generated with AI falls apart under any serious scrutiny. The first trailer for Palworld predates many of the public AI imaging models by at least a few months, and since these designs weren't likely made the day of the trailer, their creation would probably be a few months to a whole year before these AI tools hit the mainstream. It's possible that Pocket Pair created their own image generation tools, but if their image generation tools were good enough to create passable Fakemon in late 2020 or early 2021, they would have been at the bleeding edge of AI programs at the time, something I feel like they would boast proudly about, not try and hide. There's also a chance that they had insider builds for different generative tools, but now we're speculating on top of speculation. Outside of the timelines not making sense, the main reason I don't think these are AI generated is because many of them are mashups or altered Pokemon, something a human being can do extremely easily. Humans can deduce what different body parts are and combine them to create something else with ease. even if those designs are from bizarre fantasy creatures. Hell, actual children can do it, and kids are dumb as fuck. I can hand a child a stack of Pokemon cards, some pens, and a notebook, and they'll create their own mashups and new Fakemon in a matter of minutes. Why would Pocket Pair need advanced AI tools to do what Chris Chan did 20 fucking years ago? I have a much easier time believing that these pals were created with something like Pokemon Fusion than with traditional generative AI tools, which leads to the second big controversy. The first claim of plagiarism is that some of these models are very similar at a polygonal level, indicating that they are likely stolen from Pokemon assets. This type of plagiarism is very hard to outright prove or disprove. Models of similar looking monsters are likely to have similar topography. If you're a developer trying to create a Pokemon style dog without blowing out the polygon count, there will be many places that the models look pretty similar. That's mostly why I have my serious doubts that Pokemon models were used as a base model to create the pals. Like a child creating Fakemon, any 3D artist could do their own spin on Pokemon without much of a struggle. I'd go as far as saying modeling Pikachu in Blender is a rite of passage to being a 3D modeler. Many Pokemon are simple designs with simple shapes. That's a large part of their universal appeal. It also makes their general look easy to imitate, which makes me wonder why anyone except the most incompetent artist would steal the models to create their own work. In fairness, we can't with 100% certainty rule out the possibility that these are heavily modified Pokemon assets, but you don't have enough evidence that I didn't fuck your dad, so should we really broadcast to the world that I did? I think it's less likely that these models are edited versions of stolen assets rather than models pulling from very similar inspiration sources and art styles. In the case of Pokemon, they're using 2D drawings of the Pokemon, and in the case of Palworld, they're using 2D drawings of the Pokemon. There's no way around it. By and large, the pals are not creative designs. Many of them are just mashups of existing Pokemon. Don't believe me? Let's make a few of these guys real fast. A lot of the others are just Pokemon designs that have been altered slightly. This little dude is pretty much Shaman if he was electric instead of grass. This is just Gigantamaxed Eevee. This is Uwu Land Slowbro with a little Wooper thrown in. I could honestly do this all day, but IGN already did and their list is pretty good. Check the link in the description. Although I do disagree with some of these. Despite what their ninja lawyers might think, Nintendo doesn't own the rights to penguins, parrots, zebras, sheep, or foxes. A few Pokemon are just stylized versions of real animals, so when Palworld does the same thing, I'm fairly certain that they're both just imitating nature. Now, does any of this constitute legal plagiarism? First, I'm not a lawyer. Second, technically until Nintendo tries to sue and a court agrees with them, the answer is no. If Nintendo thought their IP was being infringed in some way, they would have likely issued notice years ago. Nintendo is famously litigious, so their lack of action indicates to me that they don't believe any of these designs infringe on their property. Both the AI and the plagiarism controversies are overblown with a severe lack of evidence to back up their claims. There are many valid criticisms of Palworld, but leveling claims of plagiarism and AI usage without evidence is not a constructive way to discuss those criticisms. Let's discuss my criticisms of Palworld. I want you to keep one very important thing in mind. Despite what the media has said, Palworld is not Pokemon. Palworld is not even trying to be Pokemon. There are Pokemon elements in Palworld, but the gameplay isn't that similar to mainline Pokemon games. And if you've been keeping up with any of the online discourse, this might come as an actual surprise. I, like many people, got wrapped in with the whole "it's Pokemon with guns" bullshit, which is about as true as when Far Cry 3 sold itself as Skyrim with guns. Palworld has guns, and Palworld has Pokemon-like creatures that you catch and fight, but the way you do both of those things is not like the mainline Pokemon games at all. It's different enough that I don't really see Palworld as a market competitor to Pokemon. They can both exist in their own lanes because they aren't trying to do the same things. If monster catching is enough to be a clone of something, just wait until you guys find out about Shin Megami Tensei and Dragon Quest V, games that predate Pokemon and still release monster catching games that have more gameplay similarities with Pokemon than Palworld does. Palworld and Pokemon are like ketchup and mustard. They're both condiments, people probably use them on the same foods, but everyone has a favorite for whenever they're slurping down on a big, fat, juicy glizzy. Realistically, Palworld will probably have more appeal for fans of Arc or 7 Days to Die than it will for traditional Pokemon fans. That's because at its core, Palworld is an open world survival crafting game similar to one of the 10 million games in Steam Early Access. The tech tree looks almost identical to the one from Arc, and the leveling system is just about the same. The base building, resource management, and progression is pretty much the same as any of those survival games too. But Pocket Pair didn't just take elements from survival games, they also took huge inspiration from Breath of the Wild. You can climb everything like in Zelda, you wear cold or hot clothing complete with almost the same HUD elements, story progression is done at huge towers, entering a new area plays a little piano jingle, even the glider makes an appearance, which makes me appreciate the strength of Link's twink arms a lot more, because the first glider in this game fucking sucks. The similarities to these games and the lack of Pokemon-like gameplay almost made me write the game off in the early hours. It just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and the inspirations felt more like copying existing gameplay formulas, and it all came off as incredibly shameless. I stepped away from the game for a few days and came back with a different perspective, and from that point on the game clicked a whole lot more. Despite the millions of copies sold, Pocket Pair is an indie company, yet I was unfairly comparing it to games like Breath of the Wild made by an absolutely massive company. I also went in with the incorrect assumption that Palworld was trying to do a more in-depth RPG like Pokemon when it isn't even trying to do that. Once I was set up with bases doing my busy work for me, gear that could keep me alive in harsh environments, and a blicky in my backpack, the game became a lot more enjoyable. I threw on some Pokemon playlists, link also in the description, and vibed with the game way more. Using my pals to traverse the environment with flying guys and swimming guys and horsey guys was a lot of fun. I loved running around looking for caves or new monsters and became kind of addicted to grabbing all these little green dudes that improve the strength of your rock hard balls. The world is worth exploring. With traversal mechanics and better than PS2 visuals, it's even more fun to explore than the last mainline Pokemon game. Unlike some other survival games, the world of Palworld is handcrafted. This means there are points of interest to find, secrets to uncover, and sights to see. This exploration is further fed by the incessant need to catch them all, which is something that is actually possible in this game. No need to buy Palworld Gold and Palworld Silver. By the 20-hour or so mark, I was hooked. The minimal survival elements kept me attached to the world without becoming an annoyance. I enjoyed seeing new biomes and catching new pals. I was even catching the same pals for the XP bonus and to increase my workforce. I had a massive pal slave army that I kept happy and productive. At this point, I was Palworld Thomas Jefferson minus all the fucking. It just took longer than I'd like to find the game truly enjoyable. Going into the game, everyone calls Pokemon with guns when you don't get a single great equalizer for hours and hours just sucks. The whole early part of the game is also kind of a drag even without any expectations. It has the same setup that any other survival uwu adventure game has. You're punching trees to make a thing, to hit rocks, to make some tools, to hit trees to make a home so you can have a workable table, to make some clothes, and on and on and on and on. If you have played any survival game from the last 15 years, you've played this exact same sequence thousands of times. I've personally done it too many times to get much enjoyment from it at all. It's only when you get pals that have some utility to them, like riding them around or giving them guns, that the game starts to feel much more unique. When you're building bases in different areas to automate farming of resources is when the game really cements itself as more than just a slapdash of two different games. After all this time, I fully get Palworld and I can recommend it. It's not a Pokemon game and it doesn't fill the void left by the absolutely subterranean quality of the newer games, but it's a fun adventure game in its own right. It's also less buggy than I would expect. The only annoying bugs I had were tool tips staying in Japanese sometimes, and for a whole patch cycle, the game ran slower than a fat fuck on his way to the salad bar. The two best bugs in the game have to do with the movement. One, which does this, and the other which makes you go so goddamn fast sliding down hills, you'd swear I have Vaseline on my ass instead of inside it. I swear if you cowards fix this, I will sick Nintendo on you dirty little scamps. The game clearly isn't finished. If you try to do the main goal of going to the tree, you're gonna be stopped by an invisible wall. That means there's currently no ending, but the fact that there's a big world to explore, some fun survival mechanics with automation, over 100 monsters with a lot of unique moves, and the aforementioned monster slavery, it's hard not to recommend it. If you like survival games, the new Zelda games, or always wanted to skin a Pokemon alive, I think there's a lot to like here. For now, I'll tentatively put my stamp of approval on Palworld. Just remember that it is an early access game, and their last project is still in early access as well. So who knows how fast development will go, but considering they sold millions of copies, I hope quickly. But if this thing is still in early access 2 years from now, then I will give the United Nations a real reason to lock me up. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
That's right, we're Japanese.